Okay, we're going to get started now. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of the 2016 Kids Discover Online webinar series. My name is Ted Levine, and I'm President and CEO of Kids Discover, and we're extremely excited to have all of you joining us today. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedules to listen in on this webinar featuring our guest presenter, Dr. Kimberly Greene, who's going to share a really awesome program she's developed on how to build a cross-curricular lesson to meet a specific standard, and she's going to highlight how to use Kids Discover Online's classroom feature to aid in planning that lesson. We've got a wide mix of attendees here with us, some individuals who are currently using Kids Discover Online, and also some individuals who are just learning about Kids Discover as a company. So for those of you who are new to Kids Discover, we produce science and social studies reading material for educators and students in grades 3 through 8, and many educators know us as Kids Discover Magazine, which we've been producing since 1991. Although, as I don't need to tell you, the way that science and social studies material is distributed, accessed, and consumed is changing rapidly, and so that's why we've rolled out an all-access digital library of all of our science and social studies material, and that's really the heart of Kids Discover Online. Before we kick off the webinar, just a few housekeeping items that I want to go over first. This webinar is being recorded. We'll be sending out an email tomorrow with a link so you can view this at a later date, and also so you can share it with your colleagues. You can submit questions throughout the webinar using the questions module on the right side of your screen. We've got a team of Kids Discover team members who will be working to answer your questions throughout the webinar, and we'll also select a few of the more common questions to read out loud when we do a Q&A towards the end of the webinar. And last but not least, everyone who's registered for any one of our 6 webinars, including this one, has been automatically entered into a drawing for a chance to win a free school-wide subscription to Kids Discover Online. That's access for all educators and students within your building for a full 12 months, really incredible value, and we'll be sending out an email towards the end of this week announcing the 3 lucky schools that will be getting a free 12-month subscription. So best of luck to everyone who's here. Over the past 2 years, when we were developing Kids Discover Online, we leaned really heavily on Dr. Greene for her advice and feedback. She was extremely encouraging of us to build a feature that would enable educators to have more flexibility in mixing and matching material from within our library, and specifically bridging the gap between science and social studies. And that feedback really guided our development of Classroom, which is a lesson planning tool we built within Kids Discover Online. I think it was only fair to invite her back to demonstrate how easy it is to use Classroom when planning for a lesson. Kimberly is an educational media specialist and the founding director of the Center of Instructional Innovation at Bremen University. She specializes in e-learning and curriculum design, and we're so excited to have her with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over the mic to Dr. Kimberly Greene. Kimberly, take it away.
Thank you, Ted. Good afternoon, everybody. I am authentically happy to be here today and to show you the very specifically designed way that we can use, and when I say we, I mean we as educators, whether we're talking with the little bunnies or all the way through graduate school, the way that we can design learning that really does afford inquiry and critical thinking, and all the necessary components that we hear over and over are so crucial to authentic 21st century learning. And I will add that I'm originally from Iowa, so if I sound a little corny, I want you to know it is completely genuine. So here we go. What we're looking at is a unit I designed, and the stars of the Underground Railroad, the science of our history. What I did was I looked at Common Core standards. I looked at what was grade level appropriate, and I looked at what some of the resources were, and I mean some because there's such a plethora of resources available through Kids Discover in my quote-unquote Kids Discover classroom. And as someone who teaches graduate level, I'm the chair of the master's program. I've designed a couple different masters in education programs. What I wanted to really do is walk the talk. And cross-curricular is so crucial to help students, again, of all ages, truly break out of this idea that learning happens in silos. So what I did was I had a concept, and then I looked at, well, how do we really bring science and history alive in a meaningful fashion? What is that bridge? Well, one way is by recognizing areas where science truly was crucial to different things that happened in history, such as celestial navigation in the Underground Railroad. And I'm going to show you the unit that I have designed. Please don't worry if taking notes or trying to grab screenshots. This is all in a Prezi, and it will be available if you would like it. So here we go. Da, da, da. Let me just also say I am a huge proponent of understanding by design. It is, I know, and there's a million different ways you can design units and learning, but because of the specific focus on the different aspects of design, I personally think the way it focuses on understanding works so beautifully with Common Core. So where do we start? We start with our goals, and I'm certainly not going to read this all to you, but I want to be very clear that I really did break out knowledge and skill, and then the big ideas that would serve as a bridge and a touchstone throughout the whole of the learning. That science isn't an isolated subject, history comes alive, and this is exceptionally crucial as well, that working collaboratively truly does allow people to learn and understand more than if they worked alone. You will see all of that repeated in different ways throughout the unit. So we go from goals into standards. Now, I focused on Common Core. I pulled out 4 standards. One, obviously, a specific reading focus, history, social studies. Then I looked at integration and specifically pulling out a Common Core strand that focused on science. Again, cross-curricular to ensure that students are seeing and able to bring their own inquiry into a 360-degree experience. From standards, understanding by design, we begin with the end in mind. What would be the demonstration of mastery? What would the students actually have to do to demonstrate that they have gotten the heart and soul on a mastery level of those standards? Well, you see here there's a collaborative aspect as well as an individual one. A group project, rubric-based. I am the rubric queen of planet Earth. I'm sure many of you out there are as well. And then a reflection paper on the whole of the experience, again, rubric-based, that asked for a combination of specific knowledge, how skills were applied, and what other questions the students had now that they had, quote-unquote, mastered all of this. What would they do with it going forward? So what do we do next? We look a little bit more specific, begin with the end in mind. Well, these are 2 videos I would absolutely show my students. This one is a kids doing a newscast. It's about 5th, 6th graders, and it shows them working collaboratively to bring different pieces of information together to create a coherent understanding of the different subjects. So I would absolutely show that to kind of whet the kids' appetite for where this is all going. We want them to never feel like they're scared, they don't know where this is going, I'm just throwing stuff at you today. Who knows what's tomorrow? Project-based learning. And I will be honest with you, sometimes I come at the term kind of in a back door, because it tends to be one of those phrases that people either love or they immediately shut out. So I will tell you that when I talk about it, a lot of times I'll start describing what we're going to do before I'll actually use the term. And here I am specifically using it because hopefully you're already interested in what we're doing. So yes, I would show them and introduce the fact that we are going to be working both individually and collaboratively to become experts in related areas and then bring it all together for something big and rich and meaningful. Then I would show them this video from the Youth Ambassador Program, which I have to tell you is absolutely outstanding. You know, the more real-world resources showing how other kids are using ideas and information in a creative fashion, the more we can share that with our kids, that really does inspire intrinsic motivation. It makes them feel, yes, I can, I really can. It's serious growth mindset stuff. So this actual video I would show is a group of kids who followed a pathway that was part of the Underground Railroad and then afterwards actually made a rap song of what it was like to navigate by the stars. So showing them something to give them both an idea of where we're going, motivate them, and then also to ground them that, you know what, this is doable. Other kids have done this, and so can you. So where do we start after we've got an idea of where this is going? We want to make sure that the experience allows real meaning making. It's not the 19th century paradigm of stuffing the kids with information. It's ensuring that there are enduring understandings that go beyond the individual lesson or unit, and that there are a couple of essential questions that are bigger than the immediate learning, that the students can always go back to get themselves grounded and recognize that, as Dewey said back in 1913, 1920, that education is not an escape from reality, it is a part of reality. And the more we open the experience up and help students transfer it into other learning and other experiences and other ideas, the stronger it is as a network of neural understanding neurons for them to build on. So you see what my EQs are and my EUs, and we move forward. So, assessment evidence. For anyone out there who does understanding by design for your curriculum design, you recognize how crucial this is, both formative and summative. One of the things that drives me absolutely bananas is when people are planning and they only focus on summative. And what gets missed is how crucial the teacher's role is in guiding, in facilitating, in giving feedback that isn't just, yeah, you did great, or whoops, you didn't do so hot here. The formative feedback, and if you look at all these individual performance tasks, you will see a blend of formative, small chunks, give them feedback along the way, keep them moving forward, individual work and group work. And it's a complete combination that goes back and forth. A learning process is never clean and linear. Not if the student is actually part of the process. I always joke that it's like an old Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers dance. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, spin around, break a hill, put on a new pair of sandals, and go for it again. But again, you recognize that the instructor is an integral part of the learning, especially in the pitch meeting and different touchstones, so that meaningful feedback can be given in the learning process. And that gets us to the group newscast where they get to present to their peers. Authentic, meaningful. This type of other assessment evidence, the journaling, the mini check-ins, the exploration paper, the self-assessment rubric, self-assessment for kids is so crucial. And when I say kids, I call my graduate students kids. I mean learners of all ages. Having that opportunity to stop, reflect, assess my own work, get feedback, and then go back in makes the work feel like it's really mine and not something that someone is putting upon me. All right? And a lot of this really does live in the formative world. So now I've figured out what the students have to actually demonstrate. I have clear definitions of the meanings and the understandings. And now I'm actually breaking down the individual components that will all work together to afford these learning moments, experiences, processes. This is where my resources come into play. And my Kids Discover Classroom, which I will show you, really is a crucial part, both in the beginning and then later they'll go back to it as their touchstone for doing more in-depth research as a specific member of their team who is now in charge of one area or another. We will get to that. It is crucial. But you see, there's all kinds of different levels here between a lot of reading and research to enjoyable, very fun. There's a light touch with like the science versus social studies rap battle online, the Underground Railroad, the app, the YAP. That was that video I showed you at the beginning. There's a handful of those videos that at different points we'd go back to. Different, again, kids, engagement, the Discover Kids app for geography and galaxies, and then this wonderful National Geographic app. So it is about 21st century learning. I don't want you to think that my goal is always technology for technology's sake. My goal is on the learning and the learning process and the experiences that the students truly are engaged in affectively, emotionally, behaviorally, what actions they're doing, and cognitively on the intellectual plane. And with that, let me give you a glimpse of what the unit actually looks like. And again, this is available through this Prezi, which Ted will have the URL for. So again, to show you that I truly walk the talk as I designed this, and this is a slightly modified template that I give my own graduate students. So the stars of the Underground Railroad, my goal, my focus really was 6th grade. So you see I have my established goals, started with my big ideas, my transfer, focused again on meaning, essential questions, acquisition of knowledge and skill. Now I do want to add in that I just had a grad student absolutely knock my socks off showing her principal at her school using this kind of template and the very design thinking I'm showing you, how she could translate and apply the next science generation standards into this very kind of learning experience. Because apparently at her school there had been some very uncomfortable discussions amongst the faculty that they had these great standards, but they were very uncomfortable designing for them. They didn't know how to make it coherent. And doing this work, breaking out the understandings, the questions, the split between knowledge and skill really opened those up. And then we get into stage 2 with the assessment evidence, the evaluative criteria. And when I say ABC components, again, affective, behavioral, and cognitive, I strongly encourage you all to take a look at your lessons. This is low-hanging fruit, if you will, to ensure that there is a balance that serves the whole learner in any lesson you're working on. This one is a great touchstone. And there are my resources. Here are my individual learning events that all work together to afford the demonstration of mastery by the students. So, okay, you've seen that. That's all lovely. Well, what do you mean by resources? How are you using those resources? This is where my Kids Discover Classroom was absolutely crucial. Could not have designed this unit as I did without it. So if I go into my classroom, what I was able to do was from a wide array of options and opportunities available through Kids Discover, I was able to cull out what I thought would best serve this specific learning. There's an awful lot I didn't use. But what you'll see are the resources that I did cull out because I felt that they created the strongest base. And here's where this is really exciting. If you notice the levels of the Lexiles, the reading levels, and how I as the teacher have the ability to go in and modify them, what I want to make very clear is I can change these throughout the time the students are working in this unit. Because obviously, if I start out at the lower level or even the medium level, it means that not only are the words not quote unquote as difficult to read as challenging, but there are fewer adverbs, there are fewer adjectives, there's a little less detail in the actual reading. The whole of the experience gets more challenging as you move up with the Lexiles. So I can start the whole class, or I can start an individual or two at a lower level to give them that base idea of what we're focusing in on, allow them to do their individual work, begin sharing their crucial ideas with their teams. Then when they go back and they are now the experts for one specific area or another, I can increase the Lexile level so there's more information, more adverbs, more adjectives there for the individual. Same place, I already know I'm comfortable, and I'll show you what I mean by the affective, a very strong affective component in this design. But they already feel safe there. It's a great place to go back to. So you can see how many resources I was able to start with. And again, what's so great is this lexilization that affords that kind of growth in quality as the students go from a base level to a far more in-depth. And so let's jump in and take a look, and I'll show you a couple more things that I specifically focus in on why I like the design of this so very much. And Ted will tell you, I am a complete brat when it comes to design. I have no problem saying when I don't like something and why. So when I gush about something, please know that it is very genuine. All right? Here we go. So when we start out, one of the things I like is the size of the text. I like the font. I like that there's plenty of white space on this page because from an affective level, it is not overwhelming. One of the problems we have, and I'm sure many of you will be nodding as I say this, is if you send kids to a lot of different websites to do research, there is so much text. It goes from one side of the page to the other, or it's teeny, or it's so big that the kid is embarrassed. It looks like something that should be read by someone 3 years younger than them. What's so nice is that this is a perfect size, and there's enough white space that it's not overwhelming. My initial reaction as the student is not, I can't read all that. There's too much here. This is really beautifully designed. And as we scroll down, there are images that break up the text at just the right spot. Now this automatically, without me going in and modifying, it starts at the medium Lexile level. If I take it up, if I bring it down, then again, you'll see the same basic design, but yes, fewer words on the page, more words on the page, but still from a quality perspective, it never reaches that side to side, up and down. Oh my goodness, I can't even bother going in any further. You don't get the kids who check out right away. So the images are a really great size. They're right here. They're age appropriate. And a lot of times when I say that, people think I only mean they're not too, quote unquote, old for the kids. I also mean they're not too young. Again, I will say one of the problems we have with kids, and forgive me, it does very often tend to be boys, but kids, is that if they are behind in a reading level, the material we give them, they're embarrassed to be seen with around their peers. You don't have that issue here, all right, which is why I liked Kids Discover so much when I was a classroom teacher. I was a K-12 teacher. Yeah, I've been around a while. I've taught pretty much everything, pre-K all the way through doctoral level. So again, images, relevancy, not too much, but it gives me enough. Now, I'm intrigued. I can continue to research, or I can keep moving down. For this lesson, what I would encourage my students is first go through just this material, make the notes the things you want to delve into in a more in-depth fashion. And then what happens? It will automatically allow me to align things in the order that I want them. So once the student is done with this page, he doesn't have to go back, he doesn't have to search, he can go to the bottom and automatically he or she, well, you see it's there, but I always tell the students scroll all the way down first so you know what you're working with, goes right into the next one. There's no getting lost in the design. There's no messiness to the interface. There are a couple more specific things I want to point out from a design perspective. Things like this, where again, there's an interactive component, but it's not overwhelming. The student doesn't get lost in the design. I just love this. It's not too much text. It's clear, it's solid. I can do this as many times as I need to take my own notes. Notice that the text stays. I don't know how many of you have tried using quite a few kids' resources. A lot of them are hover over, which means if I only hover over, it leaves after a couple of seconds. If I've got kids trying to take notes and they're working with material that is hover, as they're trying to take notes, it goes away. They look down, they write something, they come back up, it's gone. Okay, I got to click on it again. Here we go, I got to click on it again. Oh, and then they go. It is incredibly frustrating. And affectively, it makes the student feel like there's something wrong with him or her, when it's just bad design. See, I told you I was kind of a brat when it came to design, but I only try to use my powers for good. So as we move through, again, let me show you one more thing, and then I want to go back to the Prezi, and then I'll be open for questions because I don't just want to talk at you. I certainly want to be able to answer your questions. Here again is a wonderful example of design. So we've got all these images here. Boom. The text is a good size. It gives me enough information that I'm clear with what I'm doing, who I'm working with. There's detail here, but if I change the lexicalization, it can be more detail, it can be lesser detail. The point is, it's here, I know what my students are starting out with. I can, like I said, age it up, bring it down, but it's such a nice, clean, and clear interface. And Kids Discover is really empathetic to their end user audience, to the students that are using this. The word choices used, it's real language. It doesn't feel stilted. Here's Harriet, la 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 la. And if you can just take a moment and look. Again, look at the language. This is very appropriate, but it doesn't talk down to the kids. It's not too cutesy. That's a big problem we have in finding information and resources that kids can authentically use for research. If the information that they're starting with for their research is already too cutesy and talking down to them, then that's the tonality that the kids are going to take in doing the research. This is real stuff. This is how an authentic researcher would work with this material, would talk about this material. These are the things she did. She worked as this, this, this. It's not cutesy. It's spot on appropriate. I really, again, I know I'm gushing. There's a brief video, plenty of interactivity, but it doesn't get in the way of the work. Everything is chunked out, just developmentally appropriate. So it doesn't get too static, but it doesn't draw them so far out that the kids are playing with the technology as opposed to using it as a tool to open up their learning and afford more personalized experiences with the content and the curriculum. So with that, let me go back to my Prezi. right. And what I really do want to clarify is that everything that I just showed you is, it's not just a showcase. This is not something purely theoretical. This is something that I actually, after I built it, I shared with my son's teacher. She went bananas. She actually used my classroom and taught it to the class. I wanted to be there, but at the same time I didn't, because I was afraid I'd be too much of a cheerleader in the background, talk about self-knowledge. I knew better than to be there. And she and I have a great understanding. She was incredibly honest. She was very clear. She gave me a few pointers, a few things, which I've since modified here for you, but she loved it. And again, when I come at 21st century learning and affording authentic engagement, ensuring that from a constructivist perspective, the students are engaged in making understanding, not having it poured into them, getting the feedback they need to ensure that they are part of the learning process, and then demonstrating it back in the most authentic way possible. Those journals that the kids did throughout this unit, they blew the teacher's mind, they blew my mind. It really did give the kids the chance to ask their own questions. And those of us who recognize how important genuine inquiry is to getting these kids to move forward and continuously ask, well, how? Well, what more is there? Well, why? Not just sit back and go, give me the answer. Is this going to be on the test? Experience, experience, experience. That's what the kids need, and Kids Discover authentically affords the base for that, and then a place for the kids to go back to and become experts. So they get to move through the progression of novice to expert, drawing connections from a real piece of history to authentically how science afforded it. And there you are, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm happy to share it with you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have now, except for stock tips. If I knew stock tips, you know, I wouldn't still be a teacher. But that's another conversation. Ted.
Awesome stuff, Kimberly. That was really great, and we did have a number of questions that come in. We've selected a handful of them that we'll go over, and then anyone who's submitted a question or would like to connect with Dr. Greene, you know, we'll pass those on to her after the webinar, and I'm sure she would love to connect with all of you individually as well. So we've got a handful of questions. The first one is coming in from Kristen. Kristen asks, is it better to assign reading like this during class time or at home the night before? Really good question from Kristen. I imagine, you know, not too long ago, you know, the reading at home option wasn't really an option to begin with. So I'm going to direct that one to Kimberly, sort of your thoughts, maybe talking a little bit about the flip model, which is gaining a lot of steam over the last few years.
Yes, super. It's a very important question. The first thing, the most honest thing I can tell you is there is no one answer. And anyone who gives you a pat, canned answer is probably the last person you should listen to, because you know your students, right? You know your students better than anybody who's designing learning somewhere in an office building in the middle of wherever. I say this again to all my students, my principals, my superintendents. It depends on the class. Now, I am a huge proponent of flipped classroom. What I mean when I use the terminology flipped classroom is that it is preparation, solo individual preparation, individual engagement with content, so that when the student comes into the classroom the next day, he or she is ready to do something, ready for active learning. Now, there can be interactivity with the interface that you use in a flipped classroom, but what most people think is it just means watching a video. No, it doesn't mean just watching a video. It means prepping the students to come in and actually be ready to do something. in this case, you know your students better than anybody else. Whether you're in a well-funded district and you have one-to-one computing and you can assign certain chapters for individuals as homework and then come in the next day and have them go right to groups, that's wonderful. If you're not in a well-funded district, you can always do a tech assessment, have the kids take a survey home, fill it out. I have students, graduate students again, real-life human teachers who tell me time and time again, I can't give anything tech. We don't have one-to-one computing. I know my kids don't have anything. I say, please do a survey. And they come back, they're like, I had no idea. Everybody between a mobile phone or an iPad, some kind of tablet, almost everybody comes back and says, I really can. In that case, yes. It's a great thing to be able to do so that you're able to do more interactivity in the class time, because we all know how limited class time is. But if you cannot, or if you know that your students are not confident enough in their reading level that you can't give them all of the reading you would like, but maybe you could give them a little bit and you need class time to do reading, there is nothing wrong with that. I find I'm hearing more and more that teachers feel guilty when they're doing reading time in class because it's 21st century and I'm supposed to be doing flipped classroom, my kids should be doing blah, 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 blah. I'm like, whoa, step back from the caffeine and stop making yourself crazy. We do the best we can. So if you have to do the reading in class, break it into small chunks so that there's interactivity in between. But please, either one is best. You know your students. There you go. That's the most honest answer I can give you.
Great stuff. And just quickly to piggyback on that, with a school or a district license of Kids Discover Online, every student has a username and password, and this can be accessed in the classroom setting, in the library, or at home. So there's a lot of flexibility and use case scenarios for using Kids Discover Online. The second question comes from Tom. Tom asked, does all the content align with Common Core? I'm assuming Tom's asking about Kids Discover Online. The short answer is yes. Our material aligns extremely well with Common Core. We're actually rolling out a widget later this week that's going to enable educators to search by state, Common Core, and also next-gen science standards, grade level, and subject matter, and that will return all the standards that meet that search criteria, and underneath every single standard will be a link to every unit within Kids Discover Online that aligns to that standard. So that's something that just in the few short months we've been live with Kids Discover Online, a lot of our users have asked for. It's going to be a great addition to the platform, another handy sort of lesson planning tool, and will make planning lessons like Kimberly's designed here even faster, even more efficient for you. The third question is coming from Aaron. Aaron asked, do you have other examples of lessons that mix science and social studies? I'm going to direct that one to Kimberly, but before I do, I have to say, when I was talking with Kimberly about putting together this program, and when we have sort of guest presenters, we really like to give them a lot of flexibility because it's their thought leadership that really makes these programs work, and it's the same for all educators that use our material. Our material is there as a resource, and it's there for you to integrate, but it all comes down to the teacher and the class and what you want to do with it. And so when she told me she was integrating Underground Railroad with galaxies, with space, with geography, I had this light bulb moment, and I think we're hoping to create light bulb moments like that for the students. So if I had one, you can imagine what your students are going to feel like. But I guess, Kimberly, do you have other examples that you've used, or maybe some of your students have put together, that are mixing science and social studies like you've done with this one?
Yeah, actually a couple of my favorites were the Pioneers, and Kids Discover has a huge section on the Pioneers and the travel and bird migration. making parallels between the science of why the birds move when they do and the resources and why they stop where they stop, paralleling that with the pioneers' grand schlep across the USA. How often does a little girl from Iowa use the schlep term? But, you know, and it's very funny because if you're as old as I am, when you grew up, you probably got to play the earliest version of the Oregon Trail, where everybody died of dysentery. Well, luckily, nobody dies of dysentery and the kids discover stuff. But those kinds of parallels. Another one is Pompeii and a study of plate tectonics. That's a really good one. I had a student do an amazing unit on the Korean War and physical properties because she had heard this story, and it's so funny because just recently CNN did some video on it about how these soldiers in the Korean War asked for supplies and bullets, and they were sent Tootsie Rolls by accident. Somebody was being a little literal. And she built the most amazing unit I had ever seen, presented it to her principal, who actually took it to the superintendent, and she became a rock star. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Hatchet, anybody here ever used the story Hatchet, studying survival skills and lightning storms, geography, doing mapping out? Those are some of my favorites. I mean, and there's always I don't mean to say very obvious, but it does seem like it's a lot easier when we're talking for the younger students because the art and the science tend to go together so well. And here's the thing, I love the question that was just asked, because I had asked Ted the same thing. I'm like, hey, Ted, where's my widget to find out easily what correlates with what standard? But even when there is that, I really do, with my hand on my heart, I beg you to use those kinds of tools as a starting place. Don't let them stop you from moving on and bringing in more, because that's one of the things that we as teachers, because we're so busy and there's so much being asked of us, if we take that extra time and really step back and think, okay, this is a good starting place, but what more is there that would make sense to bring in? So the broader we're able to make the learning experience and pull in from multiple learning pathways, science, geography, history, art, education, blah, 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 whatever, it affords greater transferability into the real world, and it becomes more of a part of the learner, not the stuff I'm doing now, and then 20 minutes after I've taken the final test, I'm done, thank you, move on, and it's gone. So there's my response. I will tell you, that Korean War and the Tootsie Rolls thing was unbelievable. It was amazing.
Yep.
Amazing.
Really good. We've got time for one more question. This one comes from Jamie. Does Kids Discover Online offer any assessments? This is one we get probably most frequently. We've got a 12-page teacher's guide and a 16-page vocabulary packet. Both are in PDF format for every single one of our 125 plus units within Kids Discover Online. And so you can use that alongside the material, but we're actually in the process of integrating that stuff directly into Kids Discover Online. Makes it a lot easier for some true-false questions, some multiple-choice questions, but I think it's important to note, and I think Dr. Greene will back us in this, is that, you know, just a quick fact, the #1 referral source of traffic that is going to Kids Discover Online is directly from Google Classroom. And so, you know, when you're creating a lesson like this, when you're integrating, you know, project-based activities like Dr. Greene's put together, you know, you're not just going to lean on some quiz questions and stuff, which we want that to be a jumping off point, but it's very easy to use Kids Discover Online in conjunction with other online tools, whether it's a learning management system like, you know, Google Classroom or Edmodo, or if you want to use another online tool like Padlet, where you can pick and choose resources from a few different places and integrate them. So Yes, we are working to integrate all of that, all those quiz questions, all of those discussion prompts directly into Kids Discover Online, and that should be something that we roll out for the coming school year. But again, I think this is all about sort of the creativity of each educator, be able to come up with how this material is best presented with their class and how to make the most engaging lesson, because we know that when the lesson's exciting and the students are engaged, that's when real learning's taking place. I just want to hand it over before we close up, just to Kimberly for a quick chance for some closing remarks. Obviously, she went through a lot of preparation to put this program together. So Kimberly, any parting words for our attendees?
Don't box yourself in. There is so much joy and excitement in designing learning that really is about discovery. Let the students discover through the learning experiences you design. It's not about us telling them what they have to learn. It really is about us creating opportunities with the right resources, with the right facilitation, with meaningful feedback multiple times. And when they are truly a part of the learning experience, the intrinsic motivation is unstoppable. And I say that as somebody who's taught, again, for a very long time. I don't want to tell you how long I've been teaching, but I mean, from one end of this country to the other, and in a couple other countries, it doesn't matter what level I'm teaching, I really am a teacher at heart, and I say this to all of you. Really give the kids the opportunity to drive their learning. We create the situation, the excitement, we build the engine, but we have to let them drive, right? And we stop them from going off a cliff, but they've got to be engaged and a part of the learning process. I'm done.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, Kimberly. We really appreciate you putting the time in, joining us today, putting together this awesome lesson, and using Kids Discover Online so well. Thank you to all the attendees for joining us. Like I said, we'll be emailing out a link of this webinar as a recording tomorrow. You can watch it at a later date or share it with colleagues. We'd encourage you to do that. If you'd like to get in touch with us, general questions about Kids Discover Online, if you and your team want a personal product demo, or you're interested in getting a school or a district quote, please send us an email at questions@kidsdiscover.com or give us a call at 212-677-4457. We'd love to hear from you. We've been really excited about the positive feedback we've been getting so far from Kids Discover Online, and so we're looking to take that momentum through the end of the school year and into next. So again, thank you to everyone. Also be on the lookout for the winners of our giveaway, 3 school-wide subscriptions to Kids Discover Online. You'll be seeing an email towards the end of this week with that. So thank you everyone for joining in. We hope to hear from you soon, and happy teaching.